Looking to buy a home here in New Jersey? Well, before you make one of the biggest financial mistakes in your lifetime, you're going to want to watch this video. In my line of business, I've seen a number of buyers lose tens of thousands of dollars because they don't know what to look for when buying a home. Homes with unpermitted renovations, flood zones, plumbing disasters that are hidden behind a fresh coat of paint. These are just a few examples of what can turn out to be very costly to a new homeowner. And if you don't want to make those same mistakes, then today I'm showing you the exact types of homes that you want to avoid so that you don't get burned. Hi, I'm Corey Jones. I'm a licensed real estate agent here in New Jersey. And with that, let's get started with the common mistakes that can cost you as a home buyer anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. With our first stop on homes that you want to avoid buying, we're going to take a close look at flips by the unknown LLCs. We're going to take a look at some numbers here. And these numbers are quite interesting. There's been a 60% increase of homes flipped in New Jersey since 2020. And why is 2020 so significant? Well, as you can just think back what was happening in the nation just maybe 4 to 5 years ago, we were in the midst of COVID. The real estate market was uncertain nationwide. Here in New Jersey, that was very much the case as well. What we saw was an absolute explosion of activity, low interest rates. A lot of homes at that point in time, really distressed homes, had unbelievably low market prices. We're talking $60,000 to $120,000. So what do we see? We see a 60% increase of house flipping activity. The average flip time went from about 180 days to 90. So think about that. Increase the flips, a lot more flips. The amount of time spent on completing those flips basically cut in half. All right, so just kind of keep that picture in your mind as we go a little further. 40% of flipping LLCs formed in the past 3 years. So you're seeing a significant of people jumping into business. This is not uncommon with any kind of business where there's some kind of boom. People are hearing about or observing a lot of money is being made. How can I get in? Same thing happened in real estate. We saw a surge of people becoming real estate agents in that same COVID kind of time frame that has since weaned out. Since a lot of activity has died down, no doubt, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same for a lot of these new LLCs. 40% were formed in the past 3 years. And then roughly one in three flipped homes show signs of either rushed or unpermitted work. So if you have been searching on your end, if you have been in the real estate business and you've been in maybe viewing properties with clients over the past 3 to 5 years, I'm sure seen it. If you're here in Jersey, you absolutely have seen it. You go into a home and you can see very clearly it is basically lipstick that's thrown up to make things look bright and shiny to get a quick offer. And unfortunately, that often did happen in that time frame where there were just frenzies of offers flying in for a property that, let's say, it was purchased, distressed for $110,000, flipped for maybe $375,000, and only about $50,000 to $75,000 put into that work. Now, that may seem like a significant amount of money, but you're going to see how real quality work that's done on a house to restore it, to renovate it, often exceeds that. This is not your HGTV. We're going to flip some kitchens and some bathrooms, and we have these really super low budget amounts like a $50,000 to $75,000. That on a distressed home in New Jersey gets eaten up quickly, right? So we're going to see a little bit more detail about that. So here's some of those things that, again, you have to consider that were common issues. We're talking about cosmetic covers over structural problems, especially when you have basements. In basements tend to give a lot of information about the health and maintenance of a home. Reason being, one, we're in New Jersey, so there are a lot of homes that do have basements for one. Basements, just because they are underground, they tend to have a lot of moisture issues if they are not properly maintained or have water moisture mitigation systems. All right, so finished basements, they cover all of that up. All right, so if someone goes down there, they throw down a laminate, they put up sheetrock around walls, you're not going to be able to detect some kind of issue with moisture in a month's time or 2 months' time, and that house has sold within that time frame most often. The other thing that you're not able to see, some of the structural components, the floor joists, the primary support beam, the support columns. Are they rusted out? What's the material? All right. Was it one solid wood beam that's running? Is it a steel I-beam, which those like last forever? Or is it something that was splintered, showing signs of wood rot or decay? Like, these things totally hidden when you have something as simple as a finished basement. When we're talking about non-permitted electrical work, improper waterproofing, cheap materials, and inspections that are skipped. And this is something that if you watch some of my videos other than this one, you know that New Jersey, we have over 500 municipalities. All of them have different guidelines, regulations. Some municipalities send a town representative from the buildings department to the home before it sells to make sure everything is up to code. All right, not every place does that. No matter what, there should have been permitted work that was done, but not all LLCs are doing this. And that's why we're having to be very cautious when it's an LLC that is not known. There's not a reference point of, yes, this is an LLC, or this is an investor who has done this property, and that property. And the LLC name in itself, I don't want to get too caught up in the LLC name when we say new LLCs. Investors often will have multiple LLCs. They'll have an LLC for this property in this town or in this neighborhood. They'll have a totally separate LLC for another. But knowing who the investor is and having some insight on other work that they have done gives you an idea on their process and how detailed and how legitimate the work that has been done has been completed. You know, what's the standard here? That's what you really want to know. So with that said, towns have definitely a process where they're going to come out and check permitted work, but what if the work simply was not permitted? Some places like the city of Newark, it is hard to get around that, right? So I will tip my hat to Newark in that you're not going to very easily get by with cutting corners and trying to cover up a lot and sell a home and get a CO without the city coming in to track what has been done and what has been covered. But there's others, as long as you get a smoke certificate, you're fine. As long as you verify that the smoke detectors are up to date, that you have a fire extinguisher, and now that's changing as well because the state no longer requires it, but there's still municipalities that do. But sometimes it's just simple as that. As long as I can verify I have smoke detectors and fire extinguisher, I'm good. All right, so what does that mean for you? It means for you is that you need to have a mindset of doing due diligence on any property that is flipped. It doesn't mean that all flips are bad, because that is certainly not the case. There are some high quality flips. There are some high integrity investors out there that do their work and they do it with high quality and high fidelity. There are others that are in it for the quick buck, and that is passed on to you as a buyer. So this is something that's definitely worth having a in-depth conversation with your realtor when you are exploring those kind of options. So another hidden problem that can be very costly here in New Jersey, we're talking about flood zones. Now, a degraded hurricane to a superstorm, if you are in maybe the mid-Atlantic region, if you are in the South Atlantic region, Georgia and Florida, for example, then that's really great news, because those areas often have storms that are Category 3, in some cases 4 and 5 hurricanes. So you would think once it drops below a 1, everything should be okay. But that's not the case in the Northeast, where we're not accustomed to having storms of that nature come off of the water. All right, we have our nor'easters in the wintertime that dumps a lot of snow from time to time, but not really even superstorms that are not even hurricanes. Sandy had a very detrimental impact, and it was mostly because of winds, albeit there were some coastal communities that were in fact severely impacted down the shore all the way up into the Hoboken area. However, the storm system that really changed the map literally in New Jersey was Hurricane Ida. Now, again, by the time Hurricane Ida, which came from the Gulf Coast through some of the mid-south, mid-southern states, all the way up into Pennsylvania, came around to New Jersey, it was no longer a hurricane by the time that it reached us. However, the system sat over New Jersey for about 3 consecutive days with just torrential rain. And this system was the beginning of a pattern of more severe storms, not as severe as Ida, but more regular heavy rainstorms have caused a lot of significant flooding in various areas. Two rivers that have been impacting a lot of different communities are the Passaic River and the Rahway River. Now, these rivers run through a few counties as they run from northern to southern New Jersey, but a lot of communities now are impacted every time there is heavy rain. So as a homeowner, you want to be aware, obviously, of whether you're in a flood zone or not, and what your flood insurance policy, if you do have a flood insurance policy, all right, what does it cover? What's your liability, if you will? And if you're someone who's buying a home, you absolutely want to know, is it in the flood zone, and what is the flood history? Here is something that you should know as a buyer and even a seller. There is a report called a clue report. If you have not heard of a clue report, I'm just looking up. When I pulled one up on Google, it runs it down to you really quick and easy. It's a comprehensive loss underwriting exchange, and what it does, it gives information on all past claims, flood insurance claims for a given property. Buyers are not allowed to just call that up and get that information on a given property. That has to come from the homeowner. But buyers and their agents can request that from a homeowner. And that is relevant because in the past 3 to 4 years, there have been pretty significant increases of claims. So we are looking at insurance premiums alone have increased anywhere in the range of 20 to 400% in high-risk flood zones in New Jersey. And there are pretty significant costs to water mitigation systems that really address any type of moisture or flooding issues you have in the basement. If you have been going through any properties that have finished basements, definitely unfinished basements, you'll know right away. But even in finished basements, often agents or sellers will want buyers to know that they have installed, or they do have, whether it be a sump pump or they have a French drain. Now, these are water mitigation systems that are very common, but these systems are designed to collect water that is right around the foundation of the property and divert that water away from the property. So collection and then diversion. Very simple, but to have this done, these jobs can go anywhere from about $10,000 to $30,000 to install, depending on the size of your basement. Also, depending on where that water needs to be diverted from. Because when you're diverting water away from a basement, unlike you may see with some homes where it's simply pumped out of the basement through a little pipe and dumped right there by the house, by the foundation, it's just recycling. It's not being diverted away from the house at all, right? So to have legitimate systems that divert water away, it can be very, very costly. It is absolutely a plus if someone already has a system in place, and those systems are very effective. All right, so make no mistake about it, it is a sound investment to invest in one, but these are some of those expenses that you may not see when you first pull up and see that home that has this spectacular curb appeal. And with that said, you should really have an idea of all the properties that land within flood zones. We have, as realtors, we have access to a database that gives us all the FEMA flood zones for a given area. This is what you're looking at when you look to see, hey, is this property in a flood zone or is it not? That doesn't always necessarily correspond exactly with the insurance company's flood zone. I've been in scenarios where a home fell into a light risk flood zone on the FEMA map. However, the insurance flood zone map had it as a minimal risk and did not require flood insurance at all. So it's not a direct correlation to what an insurance carrier is going to determine for the property, but it gives you an idea of the history of that property and the risk that is at least is identified by FEMA. And now let's talk about another type of property that can drain your bank account even faster than flood damage. And this is the type of property that many first-time buyers are very attracted to. Now, I have lost count of the number of times I've had first-time buyers reach out that are in that entry-level budget and they're looking for either a condo or maybe something that is light expense in terms of single family homes, which we know in New Jersey, it really doesn't exist anymore, particularly North Jersey. But they look and they see something on Zillow. They see this super attractive price point. They see $175,000 for a 1-bedroom condo, and it has such attractive square footage, let's say 1,000 square feet, has a beautiful gym, has a doorman, has some type of waterfront or skyline view of New York City. Like, it has all of these fabulous amenities. The unit itself looks very attractive, and they say, hey, look, this is perfect for me. And then we find out, I should say they find out. I know exactly what it is just by being in the business. What they're looking at is a co-op and not a condo. So what is the difference? Now, this is what we're going to really dive into, some nuances about associations and management companies, as well as ownership types. When you buy a condo, just like a townhome or a single family property or a multifamily property, it is a fee simple type of ownership, which means you own your unit. It is your property. Yes, it's in a building, but that is your personal property. Co-op is totally different. A co-op it's a cooperative where everyone owns a membership in the building. All right, so that unit, although it is private to you, so it's not like you're sharing it with anybody who's coming down the hallway or lives in the building. Yes, your unit is private. However, you have a shared ownership, all right, a membership, if you will. Okay, so you own a share of the co-op. So the building itself, it carries all of the expenses related to managing the building, servicing the building, owning the building, repairing the building, upgrading the building. So all these things that I'm mentioning right now come with dollar figures. Okay, so that doorman, that gym, that pool, those upgrades that you see being done oftentimes in some of our more waterfront or skyline view of New York City type of locations, you know, there's been a lot of upgrades that have been done to these buildings because they have continued to become attractive, and they're still attractive. So they're trying to make sure these buildings, you know, keep up, right? So these are coming with expenses. So what the buyer does not account for, who's giving me that call, hey, Corey, I saw this unit. They see the 175, extremely attractive figure. What they don't see is that, or they don't look at very closely, it has a monthly association due of $2,800 a month. That's not mortgage, so that's not your principal and interest of what you're paying, okay? Now, what it does include property taxes. It does include any mortgage amount that's still being paid on the building itself. It does include, most often, your utilities are also included. It also often includes basic like cable and Wi-Fi. Right? So these things are included. Property taxes are lumped in that. So you are normally, with some cases, the exception is electricity, but most cases, all of your heating, water, virtually all of your utilities beyond just the normal, like I said before, oftentimes is internet as well, all right, and cable, some basic, cable, will all be included in that number, but it is a significant number. So if you take that number and then add on top of it the mortgage principal and interest, it becomes a totally different type of experience when you're saying, all right, I think this is something I can afford. All right. So it's comparable. That 175 of buying that membership into that co-op can very much be on par with spending double that amount on a condo or a townhouse, obviously in a different location. All right. So these are some things that you have to account for. And will there be a point where the association with the building determines there's more work to be done? All right. So there may be a need to add $500 a month to address whatever repair, whatever upgrade, or whatever potentially financial shortfall that there may be. All right, so these things do happen in condos as well, but condos, again, you have the opportunity to assess what the cash reserve is, what type of special assessments there have been, what type of general maintenance schedule that association has. Varies from building to building, but something you definitely want to look into very closely when you're considering that, because these are ongoing premiums, basically, particularly with co-ops, that you're paying for that building that you're living in. So important note here, be sure that the financials of the co-op and the financials of the HOA are available for review. And yes, you'll often not have that until you have an accepted offer, but attorney review allows for just that. A review of what the current health of the financial, like the fiscal picture of that co-op or that HOA, what does it look like? So you can understand does my monthly payment have the potential to change and change substantially moving forward once I buy into this location? So speaking of unexpected costs, there's another type of property that often has hidden massive expenses hiding behind that charming facade. So going back to our conversation at the very beginning about LLCs, not all work and unpermitted work are the outcome of a integrity challenged LLC investor. What you will find very commonly in a lot of homes is where the homeowner themselves, they did a lot of do-it-yourself. We call that the DIY, right? Do it yourself. It was done by them, family member, friend, somebody who had a little bit of skill or maybe had a lot of skill but just knew how to cut corners, all right? And oftentimes work was done that was not permitted by that homeowner. And how common is that in New Jersey? You've gone around to enough homes, it is very common. Often what they appear as that basement bathroom that is finished that was never permitted. Something that was done up in an attic that was finished, maybe even a bathroom in that space or a bedroom, that space being converted into a bedroom, never permitted. Perhaps there was some electrical wiring, definitely some plumbing enhancements or extensions that were, again, never permitted. So you kind of get the idea that there's oftentimes work that has been done that is aesthetically appealing to the eye until inspection comes and a qualified contractor or inspector can go in that space and find that, this is really not consistent with code, and it will be a problem in terms of potentially having someone from the town, if you live in one of those towns that has someone from the buildings department come out to take a look, will most certainly cite this, and it will have to be addressed prior to the home being sold. So it's estimated that 30% of major renovations lack the proper permit. We're talking, and finished basements are some of the most common. And when you're talking about retroactive permits, when you have to go back and backtrack all of this, it is 2 to 3 times more expensive in fees because the township is going to hit you with the normal permit as well as fees, right? Fees for completing unpermitted work. And some are relatively simple. I do recall a listing that I had, and the owner in this case had very substantial attic space that was unfinished. Decided this is just too much space for me to not utilize, and I am such a billiards fan. This would be great to have like a pool billiards room up here, and it was beautiful. All right, very, very beautiful. So it was finished, and it was finished by a friend. All right, not a contracted, licensed contractor who went down to the town and filed for a permit because he's thinking, okay, what's the big deal? It's unfinished space. I'm going to throw some flooring down, some sheetrock, some insulation. All right. Now, what was not accounted for was obviously the permit, but the permit required for there to be baffles installed along the roof line because the town code is such that there has to be air pockets, so the insulation shouldn't touch the actual roof lining, right? So there needs to be airflow that's allowed from the soffits all the way up. I'm getting kind of techno here, but to the A-frame where there's the vent. So so this became an issue where that seller had to basically have walls torn out and have basically everything reinstalled, permitted, and pay the fine. It became very, very costly to do what really should have been done up front with the permitted work, but it was something that had to be done. So when you're talking about unpermitted work, that's where it goes to the importance of having a qualified inspector or reputable inspector that can cite these different things, and even bringing in a licensed contractor for a specific questionable install or renovation, whether it be piping, whether it be electrical, whether it be structural. Implications on these is, God forbid you ever need to file an insurance claim and it's discovered that there is in fact work that was done and it was not permitted. It was not consistent with code, because guess who's going to bear the financial burden of that if it is discovered? You got it. It's not going to be the insurance company. It's going to be on you. Now, some of the things that you want to do in every single purchase situation is to account for what work has been done without permit. And I'm sure you're asking the question, well, Corey, how would I know if I go in and I just see all this work that was done? How do I know what was original? How do I know what was done by this seller? How do I know if something was done even further back from prior to them owning the home? And that is a good question. So thank you for asking. So you want to have the conversation with your realtor, with your attorney about obtaining an OPRA report, OPRA, Open Public Records Act. Townships have these records. It's available to the public. You don't need any special permission for them. You just call to ask. And you can get a permit record of all the jobs that have been done by permit, all right? Permit approved, permit inspected, all right? Pass, fail, okay? So, and closed out if it passed. So you will be able to get a full list of these. If you see there's a finished basement and you know that basement certainly has been finished within the past 5 years, something should reflect that on the OPRA report. All right. So if there's other upgrades of some kind, even if it was a UST, an underground storage tank removal, even that should show up on an OPRA report. They don't always, because some people remove these on their own. They just disappear overnight. All right. And that's a whole different conversation. But their OPRA report gives you knowledge on what has been done. So what's on that report or not on that report, does it reflect what you saw in your observations of the house and in your inspection of the house? All right. So these are things that you want to be very, very clear on, because if there are jobs that are not permitted, I've seen cases where townships have told sellers, hey, that bathroom that you have down in the basement, it wasn't permitted. We're not going to approve the sale of the home, and you're going to have to tear it out in order for us to approve the sale. All right. So some of that is going to be cut and dry, but you don't want to be in a situation where you end up moving forward in the house where a township does not send someone out to do that kind of inspection. You inherit all of that if you move forward with it. And when you decide to sell, whether it's the township that has different policies at that point in time, or the buyer is very astute and starts asking these questions and discovers some non-permitted items, it's going to be your burden to bear. But unpermitted renovations aren't the only hidden danger lurking in seemingly perfect homes. Wait until you hear about what's happening with the aging inventory of homes in New Jersey. Now, you don't have to be a history buff to realize that New Jersey was one of the 13 original colonies of the United States, and that means that there is a lot of areas that date back for hundreds of years. All right. Now, we don't have homes and buildings that date back 400, 500 years. We have some that go back some time, but particularly some of the larger structures we have with the churches. But we have homes that are absolutely 100 plus years old in our general area. And when it comes to aging inventory, you don't have to be 100 years old. We really want to date back to about the World War II timeframe. Well, let's call it 1945 and prior. So we're talking a home that's 80 plus years old by our time standards right now. So with aging homes, there are 3 primary structures to consider with the age of a home. One is going to be plumbing, another is going to be electric, and the third has to do with structural integrity. So you may have heard about the quality of both material and craftsmanship on structures that were built ages ago in comparison to what's built now. And there's a lot of relevance to that. So if you take a look, for example, at some of the major church cathedrals that are here in New Jersey and in New York, for one, a lot of these could never be built today. It just would be too expensive to build. That material is just so costly to build. Many of these structures, some of them you've seen in my video with Newark, right? So we covered one of the landmarks of Newark, and you don't have to go too far. Jersey City has them, New York City has them, and again, most often there there are church cathedrals that date back for 100+ years. Okay, so these were built in a time where they were built to last, both material and craftsmanship. And a lot can be said for homes likewise that were built in that same era. Now, where you need to be concerned is, how have those properties, one, how well have they been maintained through the years? And two, how have they been upgraded through the years? So a property that has sat vacant for years, if not decades, you can imagine what kind of deterioration was accelerated because of just moisture, right? Maybe even insect and other pest infestations. That has a significant impact. So has it been vacant? The other is, has it been upgraded? And this is where it's very significant when it comes to both electrical and plumbing. With electrical, knob and tube wiring was very much the standard practice for electrical work from the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s, all the way up until right around World War II, right around the 1940s. So what is knob and tube? Knob and tube, if you've seen it before in older homes, maybe in an attic, maybe in a basement, maybe in homes that have been gutted, you do see these little knobs that are inserted and attached to beams. You see little tubes that are run through certain 2x4s or structures or rafters. So this was the means of running wire, both hot, right, and neutral, to outlets throughout the house. There was no ground, however. All right, so without being grounded, something can absolutely have a surge and basically heat up and cause a fire. All right, so that has been put out of practice, but you know what? There are a lot of homes in New Jersey that still have knob and tube wiring specifically. All right, so when we're talking about plumbing, with plumbing, we're talking about the condition of pipes. If those pipes are still original, over 100 years old, or even if they're over 80 years old, you can imagine there's some wear and tear, there is some deterioration that has happened over time. There's often leaks that have happened over time, all right? Piping often that was used at one point in time was galvanized pipe, tends to corrode a lot, clogs a lot. You also have either terracotta or cast iron sewage lines that are not intended to last forever. They do eventually deteriorate, they do eventually collapse, they lose connection from one segment to another. So there's a litany of things that happens with older style materials and older style construction practices that have implications on a home that you love the character, you love the location, you love the appeal. Classic example in New Jersey, your brownstones in Jersey City. Absolutely gorgeous. All right. So I have a condo right now that is being sold in one of those buildings. Absolutely lovely charm that's to them. But what you have to be aware of is, what is the history of the building? What's the conditions inside of the building as it pertains to what's behind the walls? What's in the basement? What's in the attic? What kind of upgrades have been done? And unfortunately, not everyone has all of those answers when a property has been around for over 100 years. And in many cases, especially if it is a multifamily or if it's a condo situation, there could have been dozens of owners through the years. And records that, even if you want to pull an Oprah, there's not going to be an Oprah that dates back to 1915, okay, or 1929. All right, so it's going to be more recent information on an Oprah report even. So just being aware of what type of situation you're walking into with this home that is older, has lovely charm, great location, lovely neighborhood aesthetic, but what do I need to be aware of in terms of those safety and efficiency and financial pieces that could be liabilities if I don't do due diligence. If you're looking at any of these type of properties in New Jersey, please do not hesitate to reach out to me before making an offer. I've helped hundreds of buyers avoid these expensive mistakes, and I would love to do the same for you. My contact number is in the description below, and you also can use my Calendly link to book a direct appointment. And if you want to know the best and worst places to live in New Jersey, click the video on your screen now to watch the full breakdown. You don't want to miss this one. So in the meantime, as I always say, stay safe and stay tuned to New Jersey Living.